So let's take a deeper look into the productivity tab and see how we can help you provide a fair basis of comparison for the productivity of different providers in your group. So as you can see, the filters on the left allow you to pick a particular provider type. In this case, we have APPs chosen. A list of all the 23 APPs in our group shows up, and here we chose Andrea Evans. Let's look at Andrea's performance over the entire date range for which data is available. Again, fairly easy to screen for particular dates when we want to. Scrolling down the filter window, we can see that if we want to look at a particular site, we can do that as well. So here on the top left, we see the productivity by site report. We have a comparison of Andrea's performance for patients per hour and RVUs per hour by site. And we're comparing her to a fair comparison group, which is her APP colleagues. Those numbers that appear in red are percent changes of performance from the provider to the group that show a performance for the provider that is less than the mean for the group, and those in green show performance that is above the mean. Again, that gives you a quick visual clue to where you should focus attention on this provider. Are they underperforming at particular sites or not? And here on the table just below, we see the same information for the by shift data. The bar chart on the bottom of the screen reproduced this information again in a visual format that may be a little easier to appreciate. These circle represent group performance, and the height of the bar represents the provider performance. Hovering over any of those elements will show you the actual number underlying it, so you can get some more accurate information if that's something you're interested in. Really, the core of the screen as far as the providers are concerned are the top left charts that we see here. We've developed a composite score in order to accurately measure both patients per hour and RVU per hour performance. Here's a problem that this metric is designed to address. Let's say you're managing a new APP who's been working for your group for 3 or 4 months. And at that point, you need to make an assessment about their performance. Problem being, they've only worked very few shifts at any particular site in any particular shift type. Therefore, the sample size for any one particular shift is fairly small, not enabling you to make conclusions about how productive they are in general. One of the solutions that we used to use for this is pick the site and the shift which they work most frequently over this period of interest, but even then often would run into the issue of not having enough data. So how is the composite score coming into play here? What we do is we look at the shift distribution and the site distribution for this particular provider, all information in. Then we use this information to calculate the performance of the group at that particular shift and site distribution. So if the provider worked a particular combination of shifts and site, we calculate the relative contribution of any of those shifts to their overall productivity by calculating how the comparison group would perform with the same shift distribution. That allows us to collect data much faster for APPs or physicians that have been with our group for a shorter period of time and could help you as well. Here our comparison composite benchmarks are highlighted in the dashed line, and the actual provider performance over time is the solid line. So you can easily see how well they're performing compared to the group. Let's go into the provider performance chart in some more detail for this provider. The same sort of filters are reproduced on the left that we saw before. Here we're looking at the provider's hours spent and census seen. Again, a very quick tabular information that allows you to focus on those sites where they saw more patients and have a better understanding of where this particular provider is focusing their attention on and where you should focus yours. As far as shift distribution, this is obviously important as well. Some providers working lone shifts, as overnight, for example, would be expected to see a different patient distribution as those physicians who work with APPs during the day. We have to take this into account, and so we calculate the distribution of shift by shift type. We collect information about provider deficiencies when it comes to documentation and display this information for them as well. The chart by diagnosis chart is charge by patient by diagnosis chart is here in order to provide a basis of comparison for documentation efficiency. We have information for abdominal pain and chest pain as well. This is a selection of common CPT codes for non-specific abdominal pain and non-specific chest pain, taken as an aggregate with a calculation of the charges that this provider generated for this selection of CPTs compared to their group. Again, a convenient basis of comparison to look at documentation efficiency. We previously saw the solid and dashed line for the provider and composite performance for patients per hour and RVUs per hour. These are reproduced here. The idea is you can easily print these reports and have all the data needed on a single page to show provider if you need it on the spot. We also are able to reproduce these reports in PDF form and email them to the providers directly, which we do on a monthly basis without any need for manual intervention or work by your staff. Again, reproducing the productivity by shift and the tabular information about time trend performance as far as AM versus PM shift distribution. Here on the bottom, we reproduce the level of service distribution for the provider versus the group. And we use the EDBA published benchmarks for high acuity CPT to provide comparison for group, provider, and composite performance when it comes to high acuity CPT. Particularly for APPs, we're interested in how many procedures they're doing, and their patients who required procedures as a percent of total is represented here with a monthly trend as well as the group comparison. This next tab for provider performance provides even more additional detail for those who are interested. We have by-month performance for this particular provider across all metrics. And if we want to look at the mean performance for this entire period, we would look here at this line for the provider mean. And we can essentially compare their performance for every one of those metrics with the group of APPs. Here, for example, if we focus on RVUs per hour, this provider saw 4.13 RVUs per hour, and the group median is very close. We see the minimum, the mean, and the max, so we have an idea of how they're performing across every single metric. The middle table here is designed in order to have a basis of comparison for particular providers. So we use the charge per patient column in order to sort through providers that are the 0th, 25th, 50th, and 75th percentile of performance for charge per patient. And for those particular providers, we provide other metrics as well. Reason being is that we understand very well that those providers that are very efficient in documentation may be lacking in other areas, and vice versa. We wanted to provide our providers with actual data of other providers that's anonymized, that's sorted based on charge per patient performance. That allows them to understand that even though they may be underperforming in certain areas, there are providers like them that do well and less well in different areas, and so they know what they need to focus on.